He worked 9 hours, just to be told he wasn't allowed to eat. Mississippi Delta, 1938. The road was still warm from the sun, dust clinging to the tires of a worn-out truck, and inside it sat a man who hadn't eaten since before sunrise. Daniel Carter. His hands were rough, cracked from fieldwork, still carrying the smell of soil and sweat. The kind of hands that built things, but never owned them. He pulled up in front of the diner slowly, not because he was unsure where he was, but because he already knew what this moment could become. The sign above the door didn't say anything, no warning, no rules written out, just a door, plain, ordinary. But Daniel didn't see a door. He saw a question. He stepped out anyway, hat in his hands, eyes lowered just enough, not submission, but survival. The bell rang when he pushed the door open, soft, almost polite, and then, everything stopped. Not loudly, not dramatically, just stillness. The kind that spreads through a room without a word. Forks paused mid-air. Coffee cups hovered just before lips. Eyes turned, all at once, and stayed there. Daniel didn't move. Because this part, he understood. You don't rush. You don't speak first. You wait. A boy walked in behind him, white, maybe 16. Didn't hesitate. Didn't lower his eyes. Didn't even notice Daniel standing there. He walked past him like he was air, and took a seat at the counter. Within seconds, a plate, eggs, toast, bacon, coffee, set down in front of him. Hot, ready, without question. Daniel was still standing. Same spot, same silence. Time stretched. 1 minute, 2, 5. Long enough for hunger to turn sharp, then dull again. The waitress finally looked his way, not at him. Past him. Like he wasn't something to see, just something in the way. We don't serve your kind. 5 words. That's all it took. Daniel didn't argue. Didn't ask why, didn't raise his voice. Because none of that would change the answer. He just nodded once, turned, and walked out. The bell rang again, same sound, but different meaning. Outside, the air felt heavier. Or maybe, it was just everything he didn't say. He got back into the truck, sat there for a moment. Hands still, eyes forward. Then he started the engine. Because hunger doesn't wait. And in a place like this, you learn quickly. That being hungry isn't the hardest part. It's knowing you're not allowed to fix it. Daniel didn't drive far. He couldn't. Not because the truck wouldn't make it, but because hunger was already pulling at him again. A slow, steady ache that doesn't shout, just reminds you, every second. He knew the rules. Not written anywhere, but understood everywhere. Because in the 1930s, doors weren't just doors. They were decisions. For some people, a door meant food, a table, a place to sit, to rest. For others, that same door meant something else. A risk. A question you had to answer before you even touched the handle. Will they serve me, or send me away? And most of the time, you didn't wait to find out. You read the signs. Sometimes they were clear. Whites only. 2 words. Simple. Final. Painted on glass. Nailed to wood. Impossible to misunderstand. But sometimes, there was no sign. And that was worse. Because without a sign, you had to guess. You had to step inside, and feel the room change around you. Like something invisible had shifted. Like the air itself was deciding what you were worth. Daniel had felt it before. The silence. The eyes. The way conversations stopped. Not because of what you said, but because you were there. In some places, they wouldn't say no. Not directly. They had other words for that. Kitchen's closed. We're full. Come back later. And you learned fast what those words really meant. There were places, if you were lucky, where they would serve you, but not inside, Not at a table. Never at the counter. You had to walk around back, through the alley, past the trash bins, and knock. You stood there, waiting, sometimes minutes, sometimes longer, until a hand appeared through the door. Food wrapped in paper. No plate, no seat, no water. Just something to quiet the hunger. And you paid for it. Full price. Sometimes more. And when they handed it to you, you said, "Thank you," because the alternative was nothing. Daniel turned down a dirt road, a place he knew, not from signs, but from memory. The kind of place you don't talk about, but remember exactly. A back door, a knock, a chance. He parked the truck, got out slowly, and walked toward the alley. Same hat in his hands, same careful steps. Not because he didn't know how to walk differently, but because this was how you survived. He knocked. Once. Then waited. The seconds stretched again. But this time, there was no room watching him. No eyes. Just a door. Closed. Then, a small opening. A hand. No face. No words. Just a transaction. Daniel took the paper bag. Warm. Barely. Enough. Pocket. Placed the money into that same unseen hand. And it disappeared. Just like that. No conversation. No acknowledgement. No reminder that he existed. Beyond the exchange. He stood there for a moment, holding the food, feeling the heat fade slowly through the paper, then turned, and walked back to the truck. Because in a world like this, you didn't just learn where you could eat, you learned how little you were allowed to ask for. Daniel didn't eat right away. He sat in the truck, the paper bag resting in his lap, hands still, because there was something else waiting. Someone else. In the passenger seat, a small pair of shoes. Dusty. Too small for the kind of road they had been on all day. "Papa, we can eat now." The voice was soft, careful, like it had already learned when to ask, and when not to. Daniel turned his head slowly. His son sat there, maybe 7 years old, eyes wide, watching the bag like it held something more than food, like it held permission. Daniel forced a small nod. "Yeah, we can eat." He opened the bag carefully, like it mattered, like doing it gently could make it better. Inside, a sandwich, wrapped tight. No plate, no napkin, just food. The boy took it with both hands, like it was something important, because to him, it was. He took a bite, and smiled. Simple, immediate, honest. Daniel watched him, and for a moment, that smile almost made everything feel lighter. Almost. Then, "Papa." The boy looked up. "Why didn't we eat inside?" The question landed softly, but it stayed. Because there was no easy answer. No word simple enough for something this heavy. Daniel looked out the windshield. The diner still visible in the distance. People inside. Sitting. Eating. Talking. Like it was nothing, like it was normal. He could have said, "They don't allow us." He could have said, "It's not for us." But neither of those things explained anything. Not really. They just don't serve us there. The words came slow. Measured. Careful. The boy frowned slightly. "But we have money." That was the part that hurt the most. Not the hunger. Not the waiting. But the logic of a child, breaking against something that had no logic at all. Daniel swallowed. His throat dry. Not from lack of water, but from what he couldn't say. Sometimes, that ain't enough. The boy looked down at the sandwich. Thinking. Trying to understand something that shouldn't need understanding. Is it because of us? Daniel closed his eyes for a second.
just a second. Because that question, that one, stayed with you, long after the moment passed. No, he said. Firm. Even if it wasn't the whole truth. It ain't because of us. But he didn't explain what it was because of. Because how do you tell a child that the world had already decided something about him, before he even had the chance to be anything else? The boy nodded slowly. Not fully understanding, but accepting it. The way children do, when they trust the person telling them. He took another bite. Chewed quietly. And for him, that was enough.
For Daniel, it wasn't. Because he knew something his son didn't yet. That this wouldn't be the last time. Not the last door. Not the last question. Not the last moment. Where he would have to explain something. That should never have existed. And that was the real cost. Not just being denied a seat at the table. But watching someone you love. Learn why. It didn't happen all at once. There was no single moment. No loud breaking point. Just days. Stacking on top of each other. Each one carrying the same message. Said in different ways. You don't belong here. Daniel learned to move carefully. To choose roads that led to places. Where questions were fewer. To avoid certain towns entirely. To keep his eyes forward. And his voice low. Because sometimes, safety wasn't about where you went. It was about what you didn't do. But even then, it wasn't enough. One afternoon, he stopped at a supply store. Nothing unusual. Just to buy tools. Things he needed for work. He walked in the same way he always did. Hat in hand. Steps measured. The man behind the counter didn't speak. Didn't greet him. Just watched. Waiting. Daniel picked what he needed. Set it down. And placed his money beside it. Simple. Clear. Like any other customer. The man didn't touch it. Didn't look at the money. Just leaned back slightly. And said, "You better move along." No explanation. No reason given. Just a line drawn. Right there. In front of him. Daniel didn't argue. Didn't ask why. Because this wasn't new. Just another version. Of the same rule. He picked up the money. Left the tools behind. And walked out. Again. But this time, it didn't end there. Outside. Two men stood near the entrance. Not blocking the way. Not saying anything. Just watching. The kind of watching that doesn't need words. Daniel stepped past them. Slow. Careful. And for a moment, it seemed like nothing would happen. Then, a hand. Rough. Grabbing his shoulder. Not hard. But firm enough. To remind him. He didn't decide how this moment ended. You didn't hear him. Daniel turned slowly. Met their eyes. Not challenging. Just present. I'm leaving. 3 words. Calm. But something about them was enough. The grip tightened. Not violent. But closer. Too close. And for a second, everything held. Like the world was deciding which way this would go. Then, it let him go. No apology. No warning. Just release. Like nothing had happened. Daniel didn't look back. Didn't speak. He walked to his truck. Got in. And drove away. Hands steady. Eyes forward. But something inside him had shifted again. Because moments like that, they don't leave marks. Not the kind you can see. But they stay. In the way you walk. In the way you speak. In the things you stop trying to do. And sometimes, in the things you start to believe. About yourself. About where you belong. About what you're allowed to want. His son fell asleep quickly. Full enough. Safe enough. For now. Daniel sat awake. Looking at nothing. Hearing everything. The diner. The door. The question. Why? And for the first time, he realized something heavier than hunger. That this world wasn't just trying to keep him out. It was trying to make him stop knocking. Years passed. Not quickly, not easily, just steadily. Like everything else in Daniel Carter's life, his son grew, taller, stronger, old enough to remember, and young enough to still ask questions, but fewer now, because some answers don't need to be repeated. They settle. The roads didn't change much. The signs stayed, some painted, some unspoken, but always understood. Daniel kept moving through them, carefully, the same way he always had, working, providing, making sure his son ate, even when he couldn't. But something else was growing too. Not loud, not visible, but real, a quiet refusal. In small things. The way his son stood a little straighter, the way he looked people in the eye, just a second longer than before. The way he asked, less about why, and more about when. One evening, they stopped again. Another diner, different town, different road, but the same door, always the same door. Daniel slowed as he stepped out. That old instinct, still there, still warning him. But this time, he didn't stop completely. His son stood beside him, older now, watching, not just the door, but him. For a moment, Daniel saw it clearly. Not the diner, not the people inside, but everything behind it. All the doors, all the silence, all the moments he had swallowed, so his son wouldn't have to. He reached for the handle, paused, just slightly, because that weight, it doesn't disappear. It stays with you, even when you decide to move forward. Then he opened it. The bell rang. Same sound, different man. Inside, the room reacted, not as sharply, not as completely, but still there. That pause, that shift, that question in the air. But this time, Daniel didn't wait, didn't lower his eyes, didn't step back. He walked forward, took a seat, and stayed there. His son sat beside him, quiet, watching everything, learning something different now. Not just what the world was, but what it could be. The waitress came, slowly, uncertain, but she came. And when she spoke, her voice carried something new. Not kindness, not yet, but hesitation. And hesitation is where change begins. Daniel didn't smile, didn't speak more than needed. He just ordered. Simple, clear, and waited. When the plate came, it wasn't perfect, not warm enough, not served with care, but it was placed in front of him, on the table, where he sat. And for the first time, that was enough, because this story was never just about food, or doors, or signs. It was about something deeper, something quieter, to exist, without asking permission. Daniel never forgot those years, never forgot the doors that stayed closed, or the ones that opened just enough to remind him what he was denied. But he also didn't stop, didn't teach his son to stop, because sometimes change doesn't arrive all at once. It begins with someone who refuses to walk away, even when they've been told their whole life that they should.